Greetings, everyone. This is Lucian Vâlsan, broadcasting from Cluj-Napoca, Transylvania. And as always, alongside with me is here Jon Gunnarsson, broadcasting from Deutschland, and our producer James Huff, sitting in the background, making sure everything works just fine. Speaking of just fine, Google has been Googling us again. And as a result, because of Google, we're starting 4 minutes late. Sorry about that. So anyway, greetings, Mr. Gunnarsson. How's it going?
Yeah, good evening. It's going fine. It's really cold over here now, last couple of days, but it's like a week ago it was something like, 25 degrees during the day, and now it's like 10 degrees. But yeah,
Something
nothing to do about that.
about a similar magnitude has occurred here, with the notable aspect that the temperatures between the day and the night have gotten closer, something like 10 or 11 degrees during the day, 7, 6 during the night, a much smaller difference. I would rather that difference to be higher, in the sense that I would rather have 19 during night and 22 during day. But yeah, I guess that would mean I would hope for the weather to actually become progressively warmer, as we're usually told. Sadly, that's not happening. Anyway, since we're 5 minutes late, I guess we should delve in straight into it. So yeah, let's get with the first one.
Okay, the first one is coming to us from The Guardian. Scientists testing HIV cure report remarkable progress after patient breakthrough. UK scientists and clinicians working on a groundbreaking trial to test a possible cure for HIV infections say they have made remarkable progress after a test patient showed no sign of the virus following treatment. The research, being carried out by 5 of Britain's top universities with NHS support, is combining standard antiretroviral drugs with a drug that reactivates dormant HIV and a vaccine that induces the immune system to destroy the infected cells. Antiretroviral drugs alone are highly effective at stopping the virus from reproducing, but do not eradicate the disease, so must be taken for life. 50 patients are taking part in the trial. Early tests on the first person to complete the treatment show no signs of the virus in his blood, the Sunday Times reported. There is still a long way to go before the treatment can be deemed a success, as the virus has previously re-emerged in people thought to have been cured, and the use of antiretroviral drugs means the researchers cannot be sure the HIV has gone. Nevertheless, there is optimism over the findings. Mark Samuels, the managing director of the National Institute for Health Research Office for Clinical Research Infrastructure, told the Sunday Times, "This is one of the first serious attempts at a full cure for HIV. We are exploring the real possibility of curing HIV. This is a huge challenge, and it's still early days, but the progress has been remarkable. HIV is able to hide from the immune system in dormant cells, where highly sophisticated modern testing cannot find it, and therefore resist therapy. The treatment endeavors to trick the virus into emerging from its hiding places and then trigger the body's immune system to recognize it and attack it, an approach that has been called kick and kill. There are approximately 37 million people living with HIV worldwide, and about 35 million people have died from the virus. The difficulty of declaring a patient clear of HIV was illustrated by the case of a girl in Mississippi who was put on a course of antiretroviral drugs within 30 hours of her birth in 2010 after her mother was found to be HIV positive. Treatment continued until the hospital lost contact with the mother 18 months later. When mother and child reappeared 5 months later, the baby had no detectable virus in her blood, raising hopes that earlier intervention had cured her, but 2 years later the virus re-emerged. The only person believed to have been cured was Timothy Ray Brown, an American treated in Germany. He needed a bone marrow transplant to replace his own cancerous cells with stem cells that would remake his immune system. His doctor found him a donor who was naturally resistant to HIV infection due to a genetic mutation that blocks HIV from entering the cells in the human body. However, stem cell transplants are difficult and potentially dangerous for the recipient and only undertaken when they can save a life.
Well, that sounds like good news.
Yeah, sounds like very good news indeed. Whether it's actually going to pan out, is actually going to be a viable cure, is of course still to be seen, as they pointed out in the article. We've had sort of false hopes in the past, but it is definitely encouraging.
Mhm. And besides, there have been situations in the past. I do remember because I used to work in this environment, working with HIV people. There was another treatment that eventually became one of the strongest antiretrovirals that is still being used today. Was considered a cure at first, but then it turned out that it actually cures less than 0.5% of the cases. In the rest of the cases, it just simply suppresses the virus so effectively that it basically brings back to the HIV patient a very, very normal life, other than the fact that the patient has to take those drugs periodically, like once a day or something like that. So even if this one doesn't pan out as an actual cure, it could still be a very a much stronger, much more efficient drug than the previous ones, and that would still in itself be a good news.
Yep. And even though it's a piece from The Guardian, I have nothing to criticize about it, so that's
No, it's a
good news
very,
as
very,
well.
very, very good, very well written article. Not sensationalist, very honest, with all the caveats and skepticism necessary included in it. Yeah, it credit where it's due. It's very well written. I guess it's the second time. No, it's the first time this month, but the second time in the last 5 episodes when we had a science-related article that was very well written. The previous one was from BuzzFeed, if you remember. That's very interesting to see very well written science related articles from the Guardian and BuzzFeed of all places. That's very, very interesting, and I hope they continue with this tradition. I mean, mind you, as much as I loathe the Guardian, I would rather them write pieces that I disagree with, but at least write them well. That would be fantastic indeed.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
I'm
Go
not
ahead.
so surprised that The Guardian has written a good piece on this because, I mean, The Guardian, when it doesn't write about, controversial ideological topics, is actually a fairly good newspaper. But BuzzFeed, I was really surprised that they managed to write a good article about something or anything.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Although The Guardian spends 90% of its time writing about controversial political topics,
Yeah,
so
that's that.
then there's that. All right. Let's go to the next one, also from the science department, coming from PBS. Yes, I know it's not Europe, but still, PBS being the public broadcasting service, kind of a NRCO of the United States, but not really. Anyway, massive new study links birth control to depression for the first time. Millions of women who feel despondent or depressed when on the pill can finally take comfort in a new study that confirms what they might have suspected all along. The research, published in JAMA Psychiatry, is the first ever to draw a connection between birth control and depression in women, particularly adolescent women. Scientists from the University of Copenhagen tracked 1 million Danish women between the ages of 15 and 34 over the course of 13 years. What they found was that birth control is associated with higher rates of depression. In particular, women between the ages of 15 and 19 who took oral contraceptives were 80% more likely to end up being depressed. Here's Katie Metler reporting for the Washington Post, quote, "Women who used a combined birth control pill, a mix of estrogen and progestin, were 23% more likely to be prescribed antidepressants than non-users, and progestin-only pills raised the likelihood by 34%. With the patch, antidepressant use doubled. Risk increased by 60% for vaginal rings and 40% for hormonal IUDs. And for teens aged 15 to 19 taking combined oral contraceptives, the use of antidepressants spiked 80%. Although those percentages may seem shocking, the absolute change is a small but significant spike. Among women who did not use hormonal birth control, an average of 1.7 out of 100 began taking antidepressants in a given year. That rate increased to 2.2 out of 100 if the women took birth control. Still, many experts in the scientific community are challenging the research. They say that a sample size of 1 million lends some doubt on the study's claims. Many other factors are at play, including the diversity of developmental stages represented. But the study's authors stand by their work, noting that it presents the first high statistical correlation between birth control and depression. The inclusion of adolescent girls in the study is yet another reason to take this research seriously. We feign understanding of the teenager's inner world, but each new scientific revelation shows us just how little we actually know. A recent study published in the Journal of Pediatrics suggests that early puberty in girls might be linked to depression, and in some cases, depression might be triggered by an immune response. Perhaps adding to the importance of this study is this: doctors are unlikely to prescribe the pill to women who are already susceptible to depression because the pill worsens their symptoms. That means this study may underestimate the effects of contraceptives on mental health. Women are already twice as likely to experience depression as men, so while this research is complicated, the stakes are high. There are still many legitimate reasons to use birth control, but experts say that women should be aware of both the benefits and the risks.
So I like this article, and then yeah, they had to include that last paragraph.
Yeah, probably the last paragraph we could do away with. The rest of it is probably okay, including and especially this portion where it says, well, yeah, non-users have a 1.7% rate, and the rate increases to 2.2 for users of birth control. So yes, it is a significant spike, but it just sounds more awful when you say, well, it was spiked 80%. Well, yes, it's 80% of 1.7, so there's that. That's a very good clarification there, which probably most of the people wanting to write a headline about this article probably found cringeworthy, because it kind of ruins the chances of writing a very sensationalist article about it. Now, with that said, I think the critics are correct when they say that, well, hold on a second, you're just putting a very large and probably way too diverse sample size, because indeed, and again, Denmark is probably not particularly the best representative place to test these kinds of things. I mean, Denmark is already a highly depressed country to begin with. I mean, they have the highest rate of antidepressants per capita in the world. So maybe, just maybe, I don't know if Denmark was the best place to test this.
Yeah, and then you can say that in a country where depression is already there's already a high risk of depression, it matters even more if birth control does indeed increase that by 60% or 80% or whatever it is.
Yeah, fair enough. What I'm wondering, and I don't know the answer, but what I'm wondering is whether there might be some sort uh, of an influence by the culture. Because let me put it this way: use of oral contraceptives is as high in Denmark as it is in Italy, for instance, or in France. Yet, for some reason, the overall level of depression in France, either for men or for women, but for women in this particular case, is significantly lower, even though they probably use the exact same product, because, well, now they've all been harmonized and became quite identical from one country to another. So maybe there is also some degree of cultural influences somewhere in there, maybe.
Yeah, certainly, but I don't see how that would discredit the research, because even if we have a country that, for cultural reasons, is more where people are more inclined to suicide, it was still interesting to see what can increase or decrease that risk within that country.
No, I'm not saying it discredits the research. I would say that it could explain the results better. What I'm trying to say here is that maybe it's not just the birth control.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's not just, but of course, many factors factor into whether someone is going to commit suicide or not. I don't think anyone would dispute that.
Mm. No, well, to be fair, it's not about committing suicide here. It's just about incidents of depression.
Oh yeah,
On
depression.
the
Yeah.
other hand, there is a fair point in the article saying that, well, for starters, doctors are unlikely to prescribe it to women who are already susceptible to depression. So maybe we also have a worsened picture because of that overall.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I guess it probably needs further research, and I would like to see it in a place that is not susceptible to depression to begin, or maybe, I don't know. The way I view, and I've been studying Danish society for quite a while now, because it fascinates me how it is almost culturally identical with Sweden, but for some reason it has radically different results in many aspects. So and what I gathered is that maybe there is just an epidemic of overdiagnosis of depression in Denmark, because it just doesn't make sense for almost identical environments to have radically different rates of depression when you compare, let's say, Copenhagen with Malmö, which are quite literally 500 meters away from each other. So that's why I'm not that's why I cast doubt when I see that it was used as a sample size Denmark. There are too many factors there, and maybe birth control makes it even worse, maybe not, because again, the epidemic of depression diagnosis in Denmark creates additional doubt over the data, at least to me. That's why I'd like to see this study replicated somewhere else, quite literally anywhere else, just not Denmark.
Okay, fair enough. Let's wait for some additional research. That's of course, it's always when scientists discuss work, they always include that phrase, further research is needed.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in this case, it's especially true, I guess.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go further. Also from the science department and studies, quite a lot of studies we have in this new section.
Okay, this one comes from Austria, from Der Standard. Study, poorer job opportunities for women with headscarves. Sandra Bauer gets the job, Meryem Öztürk only a rejection. That is how we could summarize the results of economist Doris Weichselbaumer at the University of Linz. 1,500 fictitious applications were sent to companies in Germany for this large-scale study on behalf of the Institute for the Study of the Future of Labor, once in the name of Ms. Bauer and on behalf of Ms. Öztürk. The feedback from the personnel departments were analyzed. The summary states very clearly, quote, the results indicate the conscious or unconscious discrimination against female applicants with headscarves and immigrant backgrounds. The fictitious CVs of Sandra Bauer and Meryem Öztürk were identical qualifications, as well as photos of the same person were sent out. In this experiment, Sandra Bauer was invited in 18.8% of the cases, whereas Meryem Öztürk only made it to the interview 13.5% of the time. The difference was even higher when Ms. Öztürk was depicted with a headscarf. Only 4.2% of employers gave a positive response. To be invited, Öztürk had to apply 4.5 times more frequently than Sandra Bauer. For study author Weichselbaumer, this value is extraordinary. Another striking finding is that the degree of discrimination rose with the level of qualification. While Ms. Öztürk had to apply for a job as secretary 3.5 times more than Ms. Bauer, the headscarf-wearing candidate had to send 7.6 times more applications for a position as an accountant. The size of the company, or whether the company was internationally oriented, didn't show any effect. There's just one piece of evidence. There's just one piece of good news. In tenders where intercultural skills in an intercultural workforce were mentioned, the chances for the fictional candidate Ms. Öztürk increased about 40%. However, very few firms mention intercultural competence as one of their application criteria. And in Austria, Ms. Weichselbaumer has already conducted field trials and found a similar result. Compared to an Austrian woman, a Nigerian woman had to send twice as many applications for a position as a payroll accountant or an accounting assistant to get a job interview. The situation is slightly better for Chinese, Turks, and Serbs, but the highest amount of positive responses was for Austrians. This study was published in 2013. Anonymized application procedures are frequently proposed, but Ms. Weichselbaumer has mixed feelings towards this measure. Quote, there are both studies that find a positive effect as well as the opposite. However, then the discrimination would follow after the interview. It is clear that there's an enormous amount of application material in the German-speaking countries. Quote, we should ask ourselves whether we need a photo or if it's just a cultural habit. End quote. The most important point would be to work on social acceptance and openness, the study's author says.
Yeah, more progress. I have to say I'm not particularly surprised, nor do I think it is a problem. And now I know I'm being a very insensitive prick for saying that.
So are you in
Uh,
favor of discrimination?
yes, actually, I am in favor of discrimination. I discriminate every day, including for the people that I allow to speak with me, the people that I allow in my house, the people that I give money to, and the people I don't give money to. So yes, I am in favor of discrimination. Absolutely. Uh, I don't contest the results of the study. I think it probably stands to reason that if you're a German-speaking Austrian and you see name Miriam Öztürk. Now, I'm sorry, that's complicated. And, Sandra Bauer just sounds more familiar. Just like, John Smith sounds more familiar than Grzegorz Brzęczyszkiewicz to an English speaking person. I don't think it is a problem or necessarily an issue to be dealt with by the state or by anyone else for that matter, for the fact that we as humans tend to look into familiarity. I think we're wired that way, and this reality will not change anytime soon. And this nonsense that, oh, we should make anonymized applications and whatnot, well, you still have to call up that person to an interview, don't you? And eventually you'll still learn that that person is called Grzegorz Brzęczyszkiewicz. so uh, so you basically postpone the already existed bias, and it will come into force, or it will occur slightly later in the application process, thus wasting more people's time. Because I would guess that, for instance, if I was Grzegorz Brzęczyszkiewicz trying to get a job in England, I would rather not be called to an interview, period, than to be called to an interview and then be rejected because the recruiter can't even properly pronounce my name, and he or she gets annoyed by that fact. I mean, I don't know how to put it, but I don't think it is a problem. I just don't.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. It's also just because you're discriminating does not mean that you're necessarily biased or that you're bigoted or something like that. It may just be that they are discriminating against people with Turkish names for rational reasons, because maybe they found that on average uh, a Turkish person is doesn't do as good of a job as a German person. I don't know if
Hmm.
that's true, but maybe that's what they found. Maybe that's why they discriminate in this way, or maybe
Yeah,
they're
go ahead.
or maybe they're afraid that there might be some sort of that they might look bad if they um, if they say fire a Turkish person or some sort of other um, person with an immigrant background. Maybe they might be accused of discrimination then, and get in some sort of legal trouble with that. Whereas they would not be get into that sort of trouble for firing Sandra Bauer.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, it's the unintended consequences of these anti-discrimination laws. They tend to transform individuals belonging into whatever the law feels today is a special category. It tends to transform these people into walking lawsuits. It's a similar experience has occurred in the United States with the Americans with Disabilities Act, which basically made handicapped or disabled people literally walking lawsuits, because the law provides so many entitlements and quote unquote rights for them. So, as a result, in a few years, there were fewer Americans with disabilities gainfully employed than there were before they had those quote unquote rights enshrined into the law. And I suspect the same is true in Europe, not just in Austria, but in Europe in general, with these kinds of anti-discrimination laws. I think they probably make employers a lot more reluctant to employ those particular categories than they used to in the past, especially in middle office, small and medium enterprises. I think that is probably the case.
yeah. Also, another thing is that if you look at at the article at Der Standard, you can actually see the photos that they used. Um, one without the headscarf and one with it, and she just looks so much better in the photo without a headscarf. Maybe that's just most of what's going on. And she just looks much more attractive in the first picture than the second.
Yes, and again, I mean, wasn't there a Supreme Court rule recently in Austria that said that discriminating based on headscarf is actually perfectly fine? So why are we even making that comparison? Maybe they should have tried a different comparison. As Minjin says in the chat room, what employer wants to make extra accommodations for just one employee? It just costs more. So when you see a headscarf or a burqa or a niqab, the first that comes to mind to any employer who's sick and tired dealing with these kinds of regulations is, oh my God, another source of trouble. No, thank you. That's just what crosses through the mind of any employer. It is the reality. I mean, anyone who has ever spoken to an employer or has been an employer himself or herself just knows that. And it is something that we don't talk about it in public because it's, I don't know, I was about to say it's haram, but maybe I shouldn't say that. Oops. But no, seriously, I mean, it's rarely talked about, but in reality, that's how employers view these kinds of provisions and regulations. And when you send them a CV with a picture with a headscarf, that's what most recruiters see. Holy shit, another source of problem. No, thank you. Let's pretend we didn't see this CV. Oh, here's the garbage. There we go. I mean, that's how things pan out in reality. Had it not been for these regulations and the anti-discrimination policies, maybe things would have occurred differently. But as of now, that's how they usually work.
Yep.
And again, I don't see anything, and I know that's triggering, but I don't see anything wrong with favoring with in-group preference, basically. Because if I have a small company, I really want to be able to have as much of a natural understanding with my employees as possible and as fast as possible. And you can claim non-discrimination and equality and all the other buzzwords that are favorable and fashionable these days, but at the end of the day, I will have a much more natural understanding with an employee born and raised in Bucharest than with an employee born and raised in Nairobi. It's just not. It's just stands to reason. So I don't think it is something that can be solved or even should be solved or dealt with by any institution, be it private or state.
Yep. I agree with that. So, should we move on?
Yeah, let's go to the... Oh, it's that one. Okay.
This is coming from the Daily Mail. BBC sacked me for being a white man, even though I work on radio. The Now Show comic who was told he was being asked to make way for more women and diversity. The BBC was at the center of a damaging diversity row last night after one of its top radio stars was sacked for being white and male. BAFTA award-winning comedian John Holmes was axed from The Now Show, the hit Radio 4 program he has appeared on for 18 years, when bosses told him, "We're recasting with more women and diversity." Last night, leading figures from the world of entertainment and across the political spectrum reacted with fury to the BBC instigating a policy in which it was now choosing performers based on their gender or skin color instead of their talent. Mr. Holmes revealed that since his sacking, he has heard from other stars who have been rejected by broadcasting bosses because of positive discrimination. He told how one woman presenter was given a job only later to be told, "We can't have you because you're too white and middle class." Another performer was considered perfect for a role but could not be employed because bosses had been told to cast someone Asian, he said. In an article for The Mail on Sunday, below, Mr. Holmes said he accepted the need for diversity but asked, "Should I, as a white man, through no fault of my own, be fired from my job because I'm a white man?" Damningly for the BBC, he revealed that even bosses responsible for setting up the corporation's diversity policies had got in touch with him to say that political correctness had all got out of hand. One executive admitted it was never about sacking people who already do the job and simply replacing them to take a box. Reacting to the toxic revelations, racial equality campaigner Trevor Phillips said the removal of Mr. Holmes to make way for minority performers showed the BBC don't believe black or Asian people are as good as white people. And actress Maureen Lipman, meanwhile, called for the sacking of the executive responsible for Mr. Holmes' removal. Tory MP Conor Burns blamed the BBC's idea of diversity on its Notting Hill set worldview and said it was ironic the row came in the same week ex-Labour cabinet Mr. James Purnell was given the job of director of radio despite being another middle-class white man. Mr. Holmes had been a writer and performer on the Now Show since it was first broadcast in 1997. The program, with a weekly audience of 2 million, is presented by outnumbered Hugh Dennis with his comedy partner Steve Punt. Mr. Holmes, 47, was left stunned by the phone call a few days ago from a female producer who told him in an awkward conversation that he was being sacked. She said, "I'm afraid for the next series we are not inviting you back." He later revealed the sacking in a tweet in which he joked, and I didn't even punch a producer, a reference to the reason behind Jeremy Clarkson's sacking by the BBC from Top Gear. Holmes's axing follows the BBC's April announcement of a new diversity target to ensure that women will make up half of its staff by 2020, including on screen, on air, and in leadership roles. The corporation is also aiming to increase the proportion of its workforce from Black, Asian, and minority ethnic backgrounds to 15% by the same date, while lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender people should by then make up 8% of the staff. But Mr. Phillips, former chairman of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, branded the decision to drop Mr. Holmes on the grounds of positive discrimination idiotic. He said, "They're misunderstanding what the point of the diversity drive was about. This sounds like somebody who's basically climbing their way up the greasy ladder, and they think hiring Black and Asian talent is part of what they have got to do to look good. But they don't genuinely believe Black or Asian people are as good as white people." Ms. Lipman added, "We are talking about someone who has done some of the best work on radio. It sounds unbelievable, but if someone has sacked him for not doing anything wrong, they should be sacked for being crass. If diversity really is an issue, then perhaps someone should be appointed to work alongside John and learn his skills." Mr. Holmes has won 2 BAFTAs, 8 Sony Awards, and 2 British Comedy Awards. He co-created Radio 4's Dead Ringers, which later transferred to BBC 2, and has been a co-writer of the Horrible History series for BBC One. Leading gay activist and human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell was also against the decision to sack the star. He said, "Perhaps rather than giving John the boot, the BBC could reduce his input and give some of his slots to women and Black comedians. That would satisfy everybody." And the article goes on, but that's all we're going to read.
Yeah, it's very, very long. I suggest everyone read it in its entirety because it goes into the very detailed minutiae of things, and basically how there is a genuine cult of diversity within the BBC. And I'm using the phrase popularized now by the left-wing commentator Sargon Avocad, who made a very, very good video. Now, I don't usually recommend his videos, but this one is very good. It's called The Cult of Diversity at the BBC. Especially British people listening to this show should probably watch that video because it has also some practical activism proposals somewhere in that video. And especially British taxpayers should probably follow Sargon's lead in this regard. It is extremely twisted, and it is to the extent that it really beats everyone. I mean, it beats the politically correct university administrators in American universities. It beats the politically correct cucks in the European Union, in the European Parliament, and what it beats everyone. It just really is that egregious. And it probably proves it proves beyond reasonable doubt, at least to me, that basically diversity means as few white men as possible, and all this anti-racism nonsense is basically anti-white politics, nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think that if you want to have this target quota of 50% women, for example, I just don't think you're going to get as good of performance if you have to have 50% women. Especially when it comes to something like comedians, there just aren't all that many good female comedians. It's
Yep.
just of the good comedians are maybe 80-90% male, and if you want to have a 50% representation for women, you're going to have to settle for lesser talents.
Yep. And it's not just a sex quota, and it's not just a race quota. They also have all sorts of other quotas. They have a quota for how many trannies they are supposed to have in the BBC. They also have a quota on how many disabled people they are supposed to have at the BBC. For instance, their goal by 2020 is to have 8% disabled people working in the BBC in all roles imaginable and unimaginable in the British Brainwash Corporation. Now, the thing is that there aren't, I mean, that would mean the disabled people would be significantly overrepresented in the BBC because there simply aren't, population-wise, there are fewer than 8% disabled people in Britain.
It's also the same for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. It's also, I'm pretty sure, less than 8%.
Yes, yes, and the quota for LGBTs is I think also 8% or 6%.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. In reality, they're like 2. So, but and all sorts of these
It's a
kinds.
bit more than if you include um, lesbian, gays, and bisexuals. There are something like 3 or 4%, I believe,
Okay.
already.
Well, I'm just quoting the numbers that Sargon presented in his video. Now, if he was wrong, then I'll
Yeah,
glad.
it's a difficult question because you have to basically ask people how they identify and so on. That's always difficult to get exact numbers on. But
Yeah, but nevertheless, I don't know how would the BBC be improved if it has 80%, if it has 8% non-straight people within its staff. I mean, how would the job of typing the text for the prompter be significantly improved if it's typed by the hands of a lesbian? I mean, come on. It's just not how reality works. And this idea that oh my god, but it has to be that way because the BBC needs to reflect its audience. Really? I mean, has the BBC even done a study of what its audience is lately? Because I've tried to find one and I haven't been able to find one. Because they keep assuming that the entirety of Britain watches the BBC, which is as false as it can get. um, so, and even if that would be true, I don't understand this business of representation. I mean, for instance, when I go to Ukraine, I know that my people is very rarely, if ever, represented on TV. Nevertheless, I still do watch TV when I'm in Ukraine, and it doesn't bother me that it's not represented. I mean, Romanian speakers are 0.8% of the total population or something like that in Ukraine. So of course it's not going to be very often encountered. Well, so fucking what? Same go. I mean, I don't think your average transgender or homosexual in Britain is significantly bothered that there is no tranny presenting the news. I think they watch TV for the same reason the rest of us watch TV. That is to say, to get the news. I mean, I could be wrong on this one, but I don't think representation is really such an issue outside of the hard leftist ideological circles that produce these kinds of policies.
yeah, and I mean, lots of people all around the world watch American films, for example, even though most of the people there are American and not people from all over the world. It's just
Yeah,
a lot of people
Avatar
just
was a world.
want to watch a
Avatar
good.
was a world success, and humans were barely represented in it. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, most people when they watch television or films, they just want to have good content. They don't really care that much whether the people in it are male or female or black or transgender or whatever, as long as they're good actors, or good presenters, and so on.
Yes. I mean, if this business of representation would have been such a relevant issue, then I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't. For instance, let's say sports events. the most important, the most profitable sport event after the World Cup, the FIFA World Cup, is the UEFA Champions League, which is basically a bunch of mostly white men, mostly white and entirely male guys playing football. And it's the second most profitable and most popular sport event on the planet. I mean, the Arabs pay gazillions of euros for the TV rights to rebroadcast them in Saudi Arabia, in United Arab Emirates, in Kuwait, and so on and so forth. And there in every UEFA Champions League edition, there's probably maybe two, maybe three Arabs in total in the entire competition, and that's that's in a good season. I don't think representation really is an issue when you look at how people vote with their wallets and with their remote controls.
Yeah. Also, I mean, the audience certainly was not asking for John Holmes to be removed. It seems like no one was asking for that, except like this one guy who actually fired him.
Basically, yes. I mean, with an audience of 2 million per week, that's quite a lot for traditional state radio in modern day Europe. That's quite a lot. It does compare to some radio hosts that I know in this country, and those guys aren't moved from there ever with these kinds of ratings. And as a result, he wasn't moved from there at all for 18 years. So now suddenly it comes this diversity prick and says, well, you have to go because you have the wrong skin color and sex. And as far as I understand, this is actually illegal under British law. Now, whether that can actually be used against the BBC, I don't know. If I am to bet, it probably won't be used because, again, anti-racism is code word for anti-white. Nobody is willing to enforce an anti-discrimination law if it helps white men. It's just not going to happen.
Of course, you can't be racist against white people.
Yes.
What are you, some kind of white nationalist?
Yeah, basically, yeah. I mean, if you're daring to mention anything and label a policy to be anti-white, even though it's obviously that it is the case, then you have to be a white nationalist, because there can't possibly be any other train of thought that could reach one to a similar or identical conclusion. Like, for instance, looking at the phone call that says you're being fired because you have the wrong skin color and sex.
Yes, and complaining about it means you're literally Hitler.
Yes, it's literally Hitler. Hashtag not all. No, in all seriousness, this should be used, and the British folks that listen to this show should probably consider following Sargon's lead on this and pressure the BBC. And if I were British, the first thing I would do is to basically stop paying the license fee. It's already a huge amount, and I don't think BBC is worth it. But if I were to still be somehow subscribed to the BBC, I would cancel all my subscriptions. But then again, it's easy for me to speak because I haven't been having a TV for 10 years now. So, it's actually harder here because it's harder to cancel the TV subscription to the public TV. But in Britain, it's easier. If you don't have a TV and a cable, then you don't pay for the BBC, which is great. Everyone should be doing that.
Yeah, I wish I could do that in Germany.
You guys are sent to jail if you don't pay it. It was recently that case with that woman sent to jail for not paying for the ZDR, or what's it called? No, ZDF. Sorry.
ZDF. Basically, it used to be like that. You had to, if you didn't have a TV or a radio, then you didn't have to pay the fee. And sometimes they'd send your people to your house to check if you actually didn't have a TV and so on. Mm-hmm. But now, for the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, they have a system where you just have to pay per household, and no matter whether you have a TV or not, they're basically saying, you basically saying you could be watching TV, or you could be accessing the online stuff that the public broadcasters put on the internet. So because you could have access to it, therefore you have to pay.
Yeah, that's insane. Here it's basically included automatically in the electricity bill. So the only way you can get away with it is to either And this has only started being possible as of this year. Basically, you can move to a less regulated electricity provider, and these ones want nothing to do with the state, so they don't charge the TV fee. Or you can go and basically go through a very lengthy and bureaucratic process of sworn affidavits where you say, look, I don't have a TV or a radio, I don't give a shit about the state broadcaster, leave me the fuck alone. And eventually they will cut you off, they will remove that fee from the electricity bill. But because the fee is small, it's like €2 or something, most people just don't go through that process, even if they don't have a TV or they don't use the public broadcaster service. So yeah, but in Britain it's still possible, and it's a lot easier than it is. You just stop paying it, basically, because as far as I know from the Brits that I talked with, they'll basically send you some harassing letters, threatening to do whatever to you, and then they eventually don't do nothing because they have to actually send an inspection to see that you're not using their services, and they don't usually do that because they're short on funds. So basically, just stop paying it. It's really that simple. And as far as I'm concerned, nobody should be paying for this bollocks institution. And again, in Sargon's video, he went into great detail on how much this diversity move costs, and it's somewhere to the tune of £100 million. That's a lot of money. I don't think the taxpayers should be footing that bill. I mean, if this move had been tried by the CNN, I would have just shrugged my shoulders and say, yeah, whatever, it's their business, their money. Not my problem. But if it's taxpayers' money, maybe that shouldn't be happening.
Yep. Okay.
Right, enough with this one. The next one is also yours because you insisted to include it.
Yeah, it's a study which is called Marriage Markets and Male Mating Efforts. Violence and crime are elevated where men are rare. I'm just going to read the abstract because the whole thing is too long. The negative social outcomes in populations with male-biased sex ratios are a growing concern. In general, the expectation is of heightened violence as a result of excess men engaging in antisocial behavior and crime, thereby threatening societal stability. While intuitive, these claims are largely unsupported in the literature. Using mating market theory as our guide, we examine indicators of male mating efforts, including violent competition between men, homicide, aggravated assault, and indicators of uncommitted sexual behavior, such as rape, sex offenses, and prostitution. Our unit of analysis is US county-level data. We find that counties with more men have lower rates of crime and violent behavior. Our findings challenge conventional claims of male access leading to elevated levels of violence. Instead, in support of mating market predictions, we find that criminal and violent behavior related to male mating efforts is least common in male-biased sex ratios. We discuss the implications of our findings for public policy regarding incarceration and criminal behavior. So this is something that is sort of often discussed. There's often there's this assumption that if you have some sort of society where there's too many men, then you get more crime because these men can't find women, and therefore they go out and I know they have to rape women, or because they don't settle down, they are more inclined towards crime. And it is indeed the case, as also they discuss in the study, that men who are not married and not in a relationship are more likely to commit crimes than men who are in a relationship. But what they find outweighs this effect is that in a society where there's an excess of men, you have in such a society, women are scarce. Therefore, men have to compete for women, and they do that primarily by being sort of reliable providers, by settling down with a woman and forming a stable relationship, and this decreases crime more than the opposite effect of unmarried men committing more crime.
Okay, fair enough. I just, as you were reading, it just occurred to me that China has um, a male sex biased ratio due to the long time one child policy abolished just a few years ago, and the cultural preferences for a son over a daughter because the son has the cultural and sometimes legal obligation to care for his parents, whereas daughters don't have that obligation. So, which is another aspect that feminists will never talk about. Anyway, uh, in China, because of this long-standing tradition and because of the like 30 or 40 years of the one-child policy, it has resulted in a somewhat disproportionate, or basically more men than women exist in China at this point. Even if you exclude the factor of emigration, which is also a thing in China. Uh, with that said, there have been many doom and gloom predictions of how this will affect the Chinese society going forward, because many of these men resulted as the one-child policy are soon getting or have already gotten to early adulthood and whatnot. It turns out that maybe that was a legitimate concern, I don't know, but the liberalization of the markets, at least in some parts of China, kind of offset that, because crime hasn't actually risen in China. At least not the crime that everyone kind of expected to happen because of this particular sex ratio. It turns out that the liberalization of the markets uh, pretty much uh, tamed, or probably or even quite stopped that from happening to begin with. Because yeah, sure, it's a lot harder to find a woman, but also it's a lot easier to make a lot more money than it was in the past. And of course, there is also another aspect that didn't exist in the past, namely technology. In the 18th century, it was a lot more difficult. If you had a society that had like 65% men, it was a lot more difficult than it is now. When, let's face it, there are alternatives, including immigration, but also uh, let's put it this way: video games, starting a business, and all sorts of things that did not exist, just simply did not exist 100 and 150 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, but I mean, even back then, there were still people who, or men who choose not to get married. I mean, of
Of
course, yeah,
course.
of course, if you look at Europe, but also many other places, you had a large number of people, especially in the Middle Ages, who became a priest, or who joined a monastery, and vowed not to get married. And I mean, it's not even though we have, of course, have this biological drive towards reproduction. Um, Men are not wild animals. We can master our.
Shocking, I know.
Yeah, yeah, quite shocking. Even though, of course, we have various animal urges, we can overcome them, and uh, it's. I mean, that's not something that should be surprising, but somehow people have sort of the inclination to think the worst.
Yeah, and I think this was exacerbated by an increase in generalized feminist thinking. I mean, in the past, there used to be some sort of of an automatic respect conferred to these so-called chaste societies, not necessarily priesthood. There were also all sorts of other orders, or let's call them NGOs. The 17th century model of NGOs that pretty much had this kind of of look upon the world. Look, we're not going to get married. We're busy, I don't know, developing philosophy or developing a new theology or supporting the already existing theology in the case of monasteries and churches. And there was some sort of a societal respect conferred to these kinds of men, whereas today you look at the reaction. Various groups of uh, various groups that shun marriage and quote unquote male expectations, they get a lot more negative reaction than they used to get in the past.
Yeah, I'm not actually quite sure why people are so upset with, for example, MGTOW. Why don't people who are, say, feminists not just say good riddance to these men? Why not just say there's fewer patriarchal shitlords who are forcing themselves on women? That's a good thing, right? But
Yeah,
no, somehow they're really upset with these people.
yeah, and now, admittedly, one of the main feminist argument against this is, well, if they really want to go their own way, why don't they just leave us alone? And I'm like, well, they do leave you alone. Well, the fact that
But
they
oh my
continue
God,
to
they
they
talk
conti- yeah,
about
they
their
continue
lifestyle
to speak.
on their own blogs and YouTube channels and so on. Oh my God,
Yeah,
you
that's what.
literally can't ignore them.
Yeah, that's the part where that seems to be bothering them a lot more than the mere act of saying no to relationship, is the fact that they continue to speak. And I'm like, well, they made a commitment not to get married, not a commitment to eternal silence. This is not a priesthood, for crying
Yeah,
out loud, especially not a radical priesthood. So they made a commitment to shun relationships and marriage, but they made no commitment to being silent. I mean, they're still human, by the way, and humans tend to talk. I know that's shocking, but still. But yeah, I mean, these kinds of things get a lot more of a negative reaction today than they used to get in the past. That's what I'm trying to say. um, and I presume the new incarnations of these kinds of things uh, are emerging, or will soon emerge in the near future. I mean, in India, for instance, there is a resurgence of the colonial era men's clubs, which were pretty much gone after the independence. Well, maybe that has something to do with the fact that India has a lot more boys than girls at this point. And I presume similar kind of structures are emerging or will soon emerge in China too, and in other places where they have a disproportionate sex ratio. And I don't think that's necessarily something bad.
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of. I mean, the whole thing about getting married, getting children, and so on. That's just one of the many, many, many things you can devote your life to.
Yes.
And I mean, certainly, if any sort of functional society needs to have lots of people who form stable relationships and have children, but you certainly don't need everyone to do that, and you don't even necessarily want everyone to do that, because you also want people who, say, devote themselves to some doing some particular kind of important work. Um, would society be better off if, I don't know, say, Nikola Tesla, instead of um, working on his inventions, had a wife and 3 children? I don't think so, but
Yeah, I don't think so either. Same thing. I think we're all better off that there are lots of unmarried and probably unmarriable men that choose to work as engineers on oil rigs. I think we're better off in that particular setting than in situations where they have to take paternity leave. I mean, I'm just saying. And that's one of the reasons why being on oil rigs is so well paid, because there are very few people, and those that are overwhelmingly male, willing to make that sacrifice. And we're all better off for that. So I don't, as you said, whilst indeed the traditional model works and is satisfying for most people, it doesn't have to be for all people. Why can't there be a little bit more of a wiggle room for the outliers for whom that model simply doesn't work?
yeah. maybe these people should try developing some tolerance, which is something that they constantly cry for, but maybe they should exercise some of that themselves.
Yeah, tolerance these days has become sort of a virtue signaling um, expression, basically, because we have everything but tolerance these days. There's this more of a this we need acceptance movement. Recently there were a bunch of cultural Marxist LGBTists on the streets of Bucharest doing all sorts of gay kisses in front of various institutions in Bucharest. Nobody bothered them. Nobody even noticed them until they published their article, and they were furious by that because nobody noticed them. Uh, and the comments of the article were like, "Well, what it's a tolerant society. Who gives a shit that you're kissing in front of people have business to do?" So they responded by saying, "We don't want tolerance. We want full acceptance." Uh, what? I mean, really? Wasn't it the point to be left alone? I mean, that's what I was led to believe. Apparently, I was wrong. Nowadays, tolerance is no longer the objective. Now, the objective is full acceptance.
Apparently, they were really disappointed that society apparently is a lot less homophobic than they thought.
Well, yes, it is. I mean, because at the end of the day, nobody really cares as long as you don't bother them. I mean, there is even an old proverb that's probably like 400 years old in this country that says, "Well, just leave me alone and I'll leave you alone." Basically, that's how it could be translated in English. So as long as you leave people alone, you can do whatever the hell you want. No one will give a toss. And as much as they tried to prove otherwise, they exactly proved what those on my side of the political argument have been saying for years and probably decades in some cases. Look, you do your thing, we'll do our thing, and everyone will be fine. And they were furious by that. Oh my God, nobody teased us. Oh my God, nobody harassed us. Well, yeah, because no one cares.
It seems sort of with this progressive mindset that there's just this set of things that everyone must be fully supportive of, and then there's other set of things that everyone must condemn outright. And if you're if you're less than enthusiastic in your support for the first category, or less than scathing in your condemnation of the second category, then you're
You're a
basically
bigot.
a non-person. You're a bigot.
Yes, that's a very very well put. I'll definitely steal that one. Yes, that's a very apt description. And apparently that's progress. That's liberation. Uh,
It's always a sort of you're either for us or against us. It's you're either on the side of the angels or the devils.
Basically, yeah. These guys that I mentioned earlier in Bucharest, they published their degeneracy in English too in on the Huffington Post. I left the link in the chat room for those who are curious about their rationale and about what they actually did. But yes, this is a very apt description, and apparently shunning women and relationships and marriage, you're supposed to be very very condemning about. And well, meanwhile, alternative lifestyles or non-straight lifestyles you're supposed to be absolutely loving about and fully acceptant of. If you're if you're merely tolerant of both of these alternatives, you're a bigot, you're a non-person.
Yeah.
If you condemn one and accept the other, you're probably half of a person. uh, I don't know how this is supposed to work, but yeah, it's a very apt description, nevertheless.
Yeah, and of course, as the article that we read last week taught us, there is no such thing as a gay MGTOW, because MGTOW is obviously anti-gay.
Yeah, I never understood exactly where does that come from. I mean, I know a chap who writes conservative philosophy for a living, and the chap is gay, and he basically doesn't engage in sex at all. uh, and he's the one that is mostly astonished by these kinds of claims by the media. He's like, well, so what now? I'm anti myself. How is that supposed to work?
Internal
um
homophobia, obviously. Come
yeah
on,
yeah
it's
that
basic level stuff.
yeah fair enough. Jesus Christ. Now, speaking of internalized hatred, let's go to the next one, which is, well, it's actually hatred for children with cancer. But let's see. Coming from the NRK, which is the Norway's state broadcaster, they cannot give money to the Children's Cancer Society. This is one of the most ridiculous thing that I have read since I started following the Norwegian media 7 or 8 years ago. So it goes like this. The Ottar Men's Group has collected over 180,000 kroner, that's a little over 20,000 euros, for the Children's Cancer Society. But the organization declined the money and stopped the fundraising. It's a sad thing, responds Kai Eriksen with the men's group. The group has some values that we do not want to be associated with, says chairman of the Children's Cancer Society, Are Rasmussen, about the fundraiser. He has been joined by the media with stories about flaming and harassment of 2 young girls on the closed forum of the Ottar Men's Group on Facebook. It is sad that we cannot donate money when we are trying to do a good deed, responds Kai Eriksson, administrator of the online group. Kai Eriksson said it was important to show that the group can make a positive contribution, and within 24 hours it generated 180,000 kroner to the NGO. Children's Cancer Society are clear that they do not want to receive money from the group and to date stopped the fundraising created by the group on the association's website. Unclear what happens to the money. One of the girls that hung out on the men's group's page was Ingrid Jackson, age 20, from Elverum. She experienced being called a fuck doll and threatened with violence because she was urging people to drop their membership from the group, which she believes is misogynistic. Now, it is unclear what happened to the collected money. The association is considering returning the money, but does not know if it is possible. Had there been money that came from one account, we could have refunded the amount back, but we're talking about small sums transferred from several thousand accounts, says Rasmussen. He says that he appreciates the initiative to give money, but the attention the group has received in the media is not good for the Children's Cancer Association, says Forn Inga. It is not like we want to be profiled by the media, says Rasmussen. Eriksen of the Ottar Men's Group, on the other hand, hopes the money will come in handy. Look, there is a lot of money in there, and that we hope it can make a difference and make the daily lives of children affected by cancer a little easier, says Eriksen. He says the group is opposed to bullying and harassment and is sorry that the comments from individual members put the group in a bad light. The group, which calls itself a man's chauvinistic haven, currently has 40,000 members. Kai Eriksen has said that it should be allowed to joke about basically everything, including violence and rape, but he also stressed that the group has sharper policies for what it is published. We have hired additional administrators and trying to gain greater control of what happens in there, added Eriksen. Now, the Children Cancer Society, Barnekreftforeningen, told to another newspaper, to Verdens Gang, that they will basically pay the shekels back even though it will take them 1 week of manpower, end quote, to achieve that. Meanwhile, the name of this group, now I translated it as Ottar Men's Group, but it's basically in Norwegian is Money Group and Ottar, and it's a wordplay on the already extremist group and established group Kvinne Group and Ottar, which of course means the Ottar Women's Group. Now, the absolute irony is that Ottar is in itself a male name in Norwegian. Something else that I should probably mention before commenting. Now, threatening violence against that individual, Ingrid Jackson, is in itself illegal, but she also shamed them publicly on a public post, which is also illegal. You're not supposed to take private posts and post them publicly. Now, if the threat against her was trolling or not, probably nobody knows. But what is known is that such behaviors are very common in large and closed groups. On the Norwegian internet, whether we're talking about men's groups, vegans groups, feminists, you name it. For instance, I found a joke on the older group, the women's group, Kvinne Group and Ottar, on their forum. Here's a joke that I found there. It was probably the very prominent post. How many babies do you need to paint a house red? Answer: depends on how hard you throw. Which I think is a very good joke. So what I'm trying to say is that most of these very horrific jokes that the media is putting behind these guys are actually very common in many other groups in Norway, and I think they should absolutely be tolerated. And I don't think there is a problem. I completely agree with the administrator of the group. Well, look, we believe we should joke about everything, including about rape, including about violence, including about everything. So basically, what the moral of the story is that the Children's Cancer Society has no use of 21,000 euros because it comes from guys who probably maybe said nasty things on the internet.
Yeah, as a Roman emperor
How
once said, "Pecunia non olet," money does not stink. I mean, even if
Vespasian emperor, yeah.
yeah, even if this is the most vile group ever, and they're uh, and they are genuinely horrible people, wouldn't it be good to take away the money from them and use it to cure people of cancer? Wouldn't that be a good thing?
Yeah, I mean, I would take if I were to be the chairman of the Children's Cancer Society, and I would get uh, a check of 21,000 euros from the association Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. I would say thank you very much, gentlemen. You guys are scum, but thank you for the shekels. End of story. I mean, that's how I would do it. So I don't know what's in these guys' minds. I mean, they seem to care a lot more about their image, their perceived image, in some less than gushing rags, such as Verdens Gong, than the actual work that they do with children with cancer.
Yeah, I mean, the worse the group is that gives the money, the better it is to actually receive it, because you're depriving a very bad group of people from this money. That in itself would be a good thing, right?
Yeah, but yeah, fair enough. But then again, it just seems that this article is what gave me the idea for the title of the show. It just seems that women's perceived feelings trumps everything. I mean, oh my God, they offended two little girls. That's a lot more important than funding care for children with cancer, because that's essentially what they're saying, and uh, that's astonishing. I mean, imagine the level of non-empathy one would have to have for his work at the Children's Cancer Society to think that it is a lot more important not to send the message that, oh my God, we got shekels from these guys who offended two girls on the internet, uh, than to actually think, hold on a second, we could actually do something with that money. Because again, it's not like it's $5. 21,000 euros can mean quite a lot for an NGO.
Yeah, I just don't understand.
As I said, one of the most ridiculous thing that I read in the Norwegian media for quite some time. All right, let's go to other ridiculous things, staying in Scandinavia but moving slightly eastwards to Sweden. Coming from The Commentator. Now, The Commentator is a publication about which I'm not particularly convinced of, but this particular news is true because I've seen it in the Swedish media, and I was lazy to translate one from Swedish, so basically, there he goes. Swedish Parliament removes Baroque artist's bare-breasted painting for offending feminists and Muslims. A nude painting named Juno, which was painted by Baroque artist G. Schröder and has hung in the dining room of the Swedish Parliament for 30 years, has been taken down for fear of offending the sensitivities of feminists and Muslim visitors, Swedish newspaper The Local reported on Thursday. Explaining the ban on the Baroque breasts, a source from the Parliament says you have to think of the foreign guests, especially those from Muslim countries. Close quote. The deputy speaker of the Swedish Parliament, Susanne Eberstein, also a prominent social democrat, added, quote, I think it is more of a feminist issue. It is tiresome looking at a bare-breasted woman when I sit at public diners with foreign guests. I think it feels a little hard to sit there with men who look at us women, close quote. One humorist in Britain wondered why Swedish lawmakers could not have emulated the famous English comic Mr. Bean, who once posed in a movie as an art critic, and get someone to paint a bra on top of the offending memories in order to preserve modesty and thus prevent offense. In Sweden, the movie is being lambasted as political correctness gone mad. It is not clear whether the Swedish Parliament will now stop taking women and guests from Muslim countries to art museums. Sweden is no Sweden is known for a conflictual relationship with issues of tolerance. The country recently attracted international attention for allowing a convicted pedophile in his 60s to adopt a young child.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong? Now, again, that particular case is slightly more complex than what it is there. But yeah, in a way, they do have a point. But with this thing, let's remove art because it offends diversity. It's not the first time it happens. It has happened in the past too. I remember, I think it was in Göteborg. I could be mistaken on the city, but there was a similar sort of a how do you call it, the or sort of an urban art thingy, which was made in like the 80s on a wall, and it basically portrayed women going to the parties or something like that. It wasn't anything necessarily sexual, but nevertheless the feminists that ran the kindergarten across the street from that wall demanded the picture be covered, and eventually was covered, because it showed that there are differences between men and women, and that's triggering and sexist, and it gives a bad example to children. Will someone think of the children? So these kinds of thing of basically rewriting history and covering up artworks uh, to prevent any sort of inconsistency or questions regarding inconsistency with the current worldview of the Swedish establishment is not a new thing, and it stings every time it happens.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
another one that I remember, the law school in Stockholm also removed lots of old statues and paintings from the building for the same reason. It had too many white men, and it wasn't reflecting the diversity of modern Sweden. Same thing, and they replaced it with a uterus with a rainbow. I'm not joking. And there was so so again, I mean, this kind of thing is just so common in Sweden and so retarded every time it happens. It's just absolutely insane. You're saying?
yeah, I'm curious. Did any Muslim visitors actually complain about this statue? Do you know?
Probably not. I try to find something. No, I don't think so. Or if they did, nobody ever reported about it. Uh, I know that there was once a visitor from Iran, I think, that complained that there's too much alcohol. But then again, the same kind of complaint was levied at the French administration too, and the French administration was like, "Yeah, whatever. You don't like it, tough luck. The airport is that way." Uh, something similar happened in Sweden like 2 years ago, that there was too much alcohol when they had a delegation from Iran. But with regards to that particular picture, no, I don't think so. I don't think it happened. I'd be willing to bet it never happened.
Yeah, it's again one of these cases of people being getting offended on other people's behalf. That
Mhm.
someone might take offense at that, and we don't actually know if anyone actually has taken offense, but they might. So it's just better just remove it.
Yeah, feminists, however, did complain about that picture a while ago, 2 or 3 years ago. I think I remember reading an article about not just that picture, but a few others also that are in the Parliament's building. It was on Lady Dahmer, which is basically the feminist central. If you want to read the latest feminist stupidity that's fashionable in Sweden, just go to Lady Dahmer and enjoy. You even if you are a native Swedish speaker, you still might need a dictionary because of all of the jargon that they're using there. I mean, I've learned more new words in Swedish reading that blog than than in any other occasion. For instance, I'm still struggling to find a way to explain the word normkritisk or norm criticism, because it's just a kind of word that makes sense when you think of it from a Swedish feminist cultural Marxist perspective, but it doesn't actually make sense if you don't speak Swedish and you're not a feminist. It just doesn't make sense. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, that picture was actually the target of feminists a few years ago, but it wasn't taken seriously. Well, apparently I was wrong. At least one prominent social democrat did take it seriously. I don't know.
Yeah, apparently once again Muslims trump feminists. That's interesting.
It has become so common that it no longer surprises me. And in a way, I think they do have a point. I mean, After all, not just feminists, but the wider left and Muslims have similar objectives. I mean, they both hate white Christian men. They are both pro handouts from the state as long as they are the recipients. I mean, they have quite a lot of things in common, don't they?
Yeah, feminists and Islamists.
Yeah. Poor Richard Dawkins. What a what a shitlordy place he has stepped into it when he retweeted that thing. All right, then the last one from this episode, also from the very, very silly place, going closer to my place into Eastern Europe, well, Central Eastern Europe. Article from Fox Sports. That's because that's the only place I found it explained easily enough in English. Sparta Prague players sent to train with women's team after making sexist remarks. Sparta Prague players Tomasz Kubek and Lukáš Váha have been told to train with the club's women's team after insulting a female assistant referee during a match against Zbrojovka Brno. According to the report in US, their match last Sunday ended in a 3-3 draw with Brno, and Sparta players were incensed with referee's assistant Lucia Ratajova after she failed to call on an offside in stoppage time, leading to a Brno equalizer. After the match, Czech international keeper Kubek and midfielder Váha went on a tirade, with Kubek making the deplorable comment that, quote, women should be in the kitchen, not officiating a game played by men, close quote. In response, Sparta's Director General Adam Kotalik told Czech newspaper Lidové noviny that, quote, the players will spend several days with the club's female side so they can be made aware that women have plenty of worth outside the kitchen, close quote. The president of the Czech Football Federation, Miroslav Pielta, also moved to distance themselves from the players' actions, calling the comments unacceptable. Both players have since apologized, putting their comments down to the heat of the moment. Kubek took to social media, posting a picture of his wife and daughter with the caption, immediately after the game, I said something that saddens me, and I would like to ask forgiveness from all women. I love my girls, and I want them to achieve in life something we will be proud, close quote. Now, the thing is that one of the reasons why I think this is newsworthy is because football in general, and European football, and particularly football within the UEFA organization. Now, for those of you who don't follow football, there are basically several continental organizations that are not necessarily continental. So, for instance, UEFA theoretically regulates football in Europe, but then part of UEFA are places like Kazakhstan or Israel, which are not exactly in Europe. Same goes with South America. South America is regulated by an organization called CONMEBOL, but then Venezuela, I think, is not part of it because potato, but Cuba is because potato second. But by and large, there is one overreaching body for every continent. Now, UEFA in particular has some characteristics that probably all the other continental organizations do not, namely that it intervenes very rarely within the internal affairs of the clubs, to the extent that that's why only in Europe is it possible to see players sold for ridiculous amounts of shekels, like 120 million euros for a player, something which would be completely impossible in the United States, for instance. That's why football in the United States tends to suck. Uh, so so they don't intervene at all in these kinds of things. They don't intervene in how the clubs buy and sell players. They don't intervene in how the clubs deal with these kinds of media controversies. They rarely intervene in pretty much anything that is outside of how they behave on the field. And no, telling the referee to go fuck himself or telling the referee that she should be in the kitchen, especially after the referee has already blew the whistle, that is to say the match has ended, does not come under UEFA authority. The reason I mention this is because I've seen several Czech people saying that, oh, this is the fault of some politically correct idiot at UEFA. No, it's not. It's actually something that comes from much lower than that. That is to say, the president of Sparta Prague, or Sparta Praha, as it would be called in Czechia, is the one with the problem. The reason this is newsworthy is because this kind of politically correct chicanery is not. Basically, this kind of thing never happened in European football until very, very recently. All the other areas of sport have fallen somehow to the bait of genderist propaganda, not football, until very recently. Now, again, the exception here, of course, is England, but then again, England is a special case in almost anything. I mean, heck, in England, they fined an entire club because uh, um, their crowd said that you play like a bunch of little girls. But then again, England is a special case. For all the rest of us normal people in the UEFA association, these kinds of things are just not. I mean, it was already a huge scandal when UEFA started intervening in cases of racist chants and things like that. And even there, they're very, very how should I put it, conservative in intervening. I mean, unless it's very, very overt, they try to avoid intervening because they would rather, cash in their shekels from the game, and that's pretty much it. They would rather not be involved with all of this. So yeah, this is why I think it's newsworthy. I mean, and I don't think it's really much of a sanction, because if you want to convince these players that there is a lot of what is it called here, made aware that women have plenty of worth outside of the kitchen, well, if you want to transmit that message, you don't send them to train with women's football. You just don't.
Yeah, because
Just
that
saying.
just might send the opposite message, because
Hmm. Hmm.
it is just a fact that women are just a lot worse on average at playing football.
No, not just on average, but in absolute terms. I mean, there is no such thing as a very good women's squad. It just doesn't exist. Um, and this is proven and has been proven time and time again with very, very prominent women's football squads, either national squads or club squads, playing with 15-year-old boys and getting their asses kicked. So there is no such thing as a very good women's football squad unless it's compared to other women's football squads. I mean, the best women's football squads are still below regional legal type of level by German standards, or the fourth division by my country's standards. I mean, it's just a fact. A bunch of kids playing behind the high school on the sport field are usually better than the top tier women's football squads. So I don't know particularly what are the latest results of the Sparta Praga's women's side, because I don't follow non-sports. But I would be very, very shocked to learn that there's anything these guys can learn from them. I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, that said, of course, his comments were indeed sexist, and it's not something that is reasonable to say. And I think it's reasonable that there is some kind of sanction for that. But I mean, this like forcing the train with the women, I didn't think that's going to have any sort of positive effect.
Yeah, no, I don't think there should be a sanction for it at all, for the simple reason that a lot worse is being said on a football pitch. I mean, there is the old dictum that uh, rugby is the sport of hooligans played by gentlemen, and football is the sport of gentlemen played by hooligans. And that tends to be true. Most football players actually say a lot worse than that during any match. And this rings true from the far east of Vladivostok to the far west of FC Porto and everything in between. If you listen closely, if you could actually put a mic on every player and listen to what the players actually tell to each other and to the referee during any match, especially one with high stakes or one that is very tensioned or tensed, like this one, which was a 3-3 basically established in the 94th minute. So that's very tensed. A lot worse than that is being said. And if you are to start going down the path of sanctioning players on what they say on the pitch, you might actually have more suspended players than active players in any given moment, and that's not to the benefit, to the economic benefit of the business that football is. There just has to be some level of tolerance, and I think what happens on the pitch stays on the pitch, including the nasty words and the nasty comments and whatnot. As long as it doesn't result in physical violence, I'm completely against in sanctioning anything said on that green rectangle over there. for the simple reason that once you go down that path, you either start having some sort of double standards. Oh my God, you offended a female referee, you'll be sanctioned. You offended a male referee, you won't. Or you're going to have a lot more suspended players than active players in any given moment of time.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I'm speaking from a little bit of experience here. I mean, I did play football, and including with semi-professionals, low-tier squads, and that's just the way it is. And I also watched top-tier matches from very close to the pitch, and I was able to hear the players. The way they talk on the pitch is extremely different to the way they talk 5 minutes after the match ended. Because once the tension is over, most of them are able to get back to being a lot more polite, a lot more whatever. I mean, the tension that accumulates on the pitch doesn't. It rarely goes outside of the pitch. So that's why I say that such comments on the pitch are at the very least excusable, and it should probably never be sanctioned outside of maybe poking fun at them at the media or something like that maybe. But other than that, no, because it kind of takes everyone onto a very dangerous path. And that would be the moment when UEFA will start noticing dwindling profits, and that's I presume they don't want that. Just saying.
All right.
Okay, so yeah, enough of the silly place. Next week I won't be here because I'll be in the capital during a meet and greet with some of the local fans. I'm not particularly not going to like it because I don't like Bucharest, but that's a different story. But yeah, next week definitely I won't be here. 2 weeks from now, October 21st. Yes, yeah, October 21st is available, and probably on October 21st we might have a guest from Finland. I say might because I'm not yet 100% sure.
I'm not sure if I can make it on the 21st, but I will let you know.
Okay, if you can't make it and I book the Finnish guest, then we'll kick the ball around amongst ourselves. If not, then I'll let everyone know that October 21st is a no-show if you can't make it. Sounds good enough?
All right.
That's all I had to say because I already need to drink something. I've been speaking too much. So unless you have something else to say?
Yeah, while if you're drinking some water, you might also just take the red pill.
Yep, take the red pill. Goodbye, everyone.